3 knocks on the door, sharp and deliberate, sounded like a judge's gavel striking in a courtroom. I opened it, and standing there was a man in a dark suit, a leather briefcase tucked under his arm. He looked at me with a cold expression and asked, "Are you Margaret Walker?" "Yes, I am," I answered, my hand trembling from the surprise. "I'm an attorney representing your son, David Walker. He intends to initiate guardianship proceedings to take over your finances. He believes you may be showing signs of diminished capacity and are no longer capable of making sound financial decisions." I froze. In 70 years of life, I had faced many fears: losing my husband, raising a son alone, working double shifts just to keep us afloat. But never, not once, did I imagine that my only child, my own flesh and blood, I would try to have me declared incompetent in order to seize control of the savings I had worked my whole life to build. The man handed me a stack of papers and walked away. The door closed. But my little house suddenly felt as cold as a prison. I sank into the old armchair in the living room, the very chair where I once cradled David as a baby. That memory hit me like a film running backward. In this chair, I had whispered lullabies to help him sleep. I had promised myself he would have everything he needed, that his life would be better than mine. And now, in that same room, I sat trembling, holding papers that proved he saw me not as a mother, but as an obstacle to remove. I closed my eyes, and the memory of a few weeks ago came rushing back. The door had flown open then too, but it wasn't a lawyer. It was David, my son, storming into the house, with his face red from fury. "Mom, where are you?" His voice echoed through the house. I was folding laundry in the bedroom. I stepped into the hall and saw my 42-year-old son standing in the living room, his green eyes blazing, his fists clenched tight. "Why did Amanda call me crying? She said you changed the password on your card and embarrassed her at the grocery store. How could you humiliate her like that?" I froze, staring at the son I had sacrificed everything to raise. "David, lower your voice. We're educated people. And yes, I changed the password. Because it's my card. Your card," he practically shouted. "You're really going to be that selfish?" Amanda was buying groceries and supplies for this house. Family is supposed to rely on each other. But I knew exactly what Amanda had bought. I had checked the statement the week before. $200 on makeup, $300 on clothes, $500 at an expensive restaurant. I swallowed that truth down because I couldn't bear another screaming match. "Son, if you need money for something important, we can talk about it. But I can't leave my card open for anyone to use." "Anyone? Are you calling my wife just anyone?" His voice rose higher. "Amanda is family. She deserves to be trusted." I dropped into the armchair, my whole body trembling, but I forced my tone to stay calm. "Amanda will always be welcome in this house. But my credit card isn't a family service. It's the money I worked for, all my life." David started pacing, his shoes pounding against the hardwood floor. "Unbelievable. You've always been generous, helping neighbors, helping relatives, and now, when your own family needs support, you turn into a miser." That word pierced deeper than any scream. Misère. I was the one who had worked double shifts after my husband, Richard, passed away. I had given up my own dreams so David could go to college. I had paid the down payment on his first apartment. And now, here he was, treating me like a walking wallet. "David," I said, my voice shaking, but firm. "I won't let you talk to me like that in my own home." "Then explain yourself. Why change the password without telling me first?" "Because I found expenses I didn't authorize. Thousands of dollars gone." For the first time, he went silent. Then he glared at me. "Amanda told me she always asked before using the card. She lied." The words slipped out before I could stop them. The silence in the room grew thick. David looked at me as if I'd just slapped him. "Don't you ever insult my wife like that? If you can't trust your family, maybe it's time someone else handled your finances." The suggestion struck me like lightning. My own son hinting that I couldn't manage my own money. I stood, my back aching, but my will unshaken. "David, you need to leave. That's my final word. I'm not leaving until you come to your senses." He shot back. "When you calm down, we'll talk again." The door slammed behind him. Now, holding the guardianship papers. I understood. That wasn't just angry talk. He meant it. He truly wanted to take over my life. I sat still in my armchair, staring out the window at the begonias blooming in the garden. The sun was shining, but the air in my house had changed forever. After the lawyer left my house that afternoon, I sat in silence for a long while. My hands rested on the papers spread across the coffee table, but my mind drifted far away. To understand how I had reached this moment, accused of paranoia by my own son, I had to revisit the past, the steady years when trust felt unshakable. For 30 years, my strength had been my routine. It carried me through the dark days after Richard died. Every morning I woke at 6, just as I still do, and brewed coffee in the same machine he bought me on our 15th anniversary. I would step out onto the back patio, feel the first warmth of the sun on the tiles, and water the begonias and geraniums. That structure was my lifeline. Without it, grief might have swallowed me whole. Richard and I bought this 2-story house when I was pregnant with David. It took us 20 years to pay off the mortgage, dollar by dollar, but it was worth it. Every corner held a memory. The backyard where David learned to walk, the kitchen where I cooked thousands of meals, the living room where every birthday candle had been blown out. This house was more than wood and walls. It was proof of our perseverance. Richard wasn't wealthy. He worked as an accountant at a small firm for decades. He never missed a day, never complained, never broke a promise. When he died suddenly of a heart attack, David was only 12. Overnight, the burden of keeping this house and raising our son alone fell onto my shoulders. I remember standing in this very living room, the mortgage papers spread out on the table, and whispering to myself, "You can do this. Margaret, you must." So I worked 2 jobs at times. I was a clerk during the day and a cashier at night. I stretched every penny. I mended David's clothes until the fabric nearly gave out. I packed lunches so he could eat at school without costing extra. There were nights when my feet ached so badly I could hardly stand. But I never let David see. He deserved a boyhood free of the weight that pressed so heavily on me. And he was a good son, at least, back then. He was studious, polite, and affectionate. When he graduated high school, I cried tears of pride more than exhaustion. I told myself every sacrifice had been worth it. Later, when he went off to college to study accounting, following in his father's footsteps, I felt that the dream Richard and I once shared was finally real. Sundays became our tradition. No matter how busy his life got, David always came home for dinner. I'd cook a roast or stew, and we'd sit at this very table laughing about professors, friends, or stories from my work. Those Sundays gave me hope that even after Richard's death, family ties could remain strong. I also carried my generosity beyond these walls. Neighbors knew me as the woman who would show up with food if someone fell ill, or who'd lend a few $100s without charging interest if a family was in need. That was my way of honoring Richard's memory. He believed kindness was wealth. No thief could steal. So when David first introduced me to Amanda, I welcomed her warmly. I wanted to believe she was part of that circle of trust, that sacred chain of giving and receiving that held our family together. I remember the first night they walked in. David's smile was brighter than I'd seen since his teenage years. Amanda shook my hand, complimented my cooking, admired the garden, even helped wash dishes after dinner. I thought, my son has chosen well. The wedding was small but elegant. David looked so happy that day. Amanda planned every detail, the flowers, the dress, the music. I paid half the expenses without them even asking, because he was my only son, and this was my one chance to stand as mother of the groom. I signed the checks gladly, believing it was another investment in family love. In the early months of their marriage, my house felt full again. They came over often, sat at the table telling me stories of their new apartment, their new routines. I cooked. I listened. I laughed. For the first time since Richard died, I thought, yes, this is the family I dreamed of building. We are whole again. That's why the small requests didn't alarm me at first. $200 for a tight month, $300 for clothes Amanda needed for work, $500 for some unexpected expense. Each time, they promised repayment. Each time, I believed them. Because trust, rooted so deeply, doesn't disappear overnight. But trust, I would learn, can be chipped away slowly, like a tree, eaten hollow from the inside until it collapses. Looking back now, I see the signs were there. The smiles that felt rehearsed, the excuses that came too easily. The way Amanda's eyes swept over my home, as if measuring what could be hers one day. But at the time, I told myself not to be suspicious. They're young. They're building a life. Families help each other. That's what I thought as I handed over my credit card the first time, for what Amanda swore was a real emergency. That's what I thought as I watched charges pile up, telling myself they'd surely pay me back. And that's what I thought, right up until the afternoon my son called me a miser in my own home. Now, with guardianship papers sitting on my table, I see the cruel irony. The very trust I built my life upon had become the weapon used against me. When people talk about being taken advantage of, they imagine a sudden betrayal, someone storming into your life and robbing you blind in one bold act. But the truth, at least in my case, was nothing like that. It was gradual, like water dripping on stone. Each drop seemed insignificant, until one day the stone had worn away completely. It started, as I said, with those small requests. $200 here, $300 there. Amanda always spoke with a sweet, almost apologetic tone, as though she hated to ask, just until Friday. She'd promise, or, "We'll pay you back as soon as David's bonus comes through." They were so young, so recently married. How could I say no? I told myself it was natural for young couples to stumble financially in the beginning. But Friday came and went. Bonuses never materialized, and each loan quietly morphed into a gift. At first, I tried to keep a mental ledger. I'd remind myself, that's $500 now. That's almost $1,000. But after a while the numbers blurred together, and I stopped counting. It was easier that way. Easier to pretend my help wasn't costing me anything. Months later, when I finally sat down with my bank statements, I realized I had given them nearly $5,000. $5,000. That wasn't helping. That was subsidizing. I brought it up one Sunday at dinner. I had made chicken pot pie, David's favorite. As we ate, I said gently, "Son, I've added up everything I've lent you. It's about $5,000 now. That's a lot of money." David. He looked uncomfortable, pushing food around on his plate. "Mom, you know we'll pay you back. I don't understand why you're keeping such exact accounts. We're family." Family, that word again. Like a lock he believed could open every door. Before I could answer, Amanda leaned in with her most charming smile. "You're right, Margaret. We've been careless with payments. To make things easier, why don't we give you my credit card as collateral?" Collateral. As if I were a bank. I didn't want their card. I wanted repayment. But Amanda pressed it into my hand as though she were granting me a favor. I accepted it, unsure how else to respond. A week later, she called in a desperate voice. "Margaret, I have an emergency. My mom needs medicine, and my card is blocked. Can I borrow yours just for today?" Of course. I said yes. What kind of mother-in-law would deny someone medicine? That night, I logged into my account. I saw a charge of $150 at the pharmacy. Good, I thought. That was what she said it was for. But then I saw $80 at a cosmetic store, $200 at a clothing boutique, and $30 at a downtown restaurant. When I confronted Amanda the next day, she dissolved into tears. "I'm so sorry, Margaret. I was at the mall, and there were incredible sales. I just thought it would be okay. I'll pay you back tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. Neither did the next repayment, or the next. Instead, there were new emergencies. Her sister's birthday, shoes for a wedding, a surprise gift for David, always urgent, always with promises of reimbursement. And me, I let it continue. I told myself it was temporary, that things would even out. I told myself that generosity was my strength, not my weakness. But deep down, I felt the ground shifting under me. One night, I sat at the dining table with bills spread out before me. My retirement account was shrinking faster than it should. The numbers no longer made sense. I had always lived frugally. How, then, was I spending more than I earned? The answer stared back at me from the page. Amanda and David. In 6 months, nearly $10,000 had drained away. That night, sleep would not come. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, adding figures in my head, replaying every conversation, every excuse. My generosity had become their expectation, My help had become their entitlement. Still, when Sunday rolled around, I cooked, I set the table, I waited for them to arrive. And when they did, they spoke of bills they couldn't pay, of opportunities they were missing, of how much better life would be with just a little more money. If we had a better car, I could get a better job, Amanda said, twirling her new phone in her hand. If we lived in a nicer neighborhood, we'd have a better quality of life, David added, scooping another serving of stew. I listened in silence, realizing their words weren't casual observations. They were strategies, indirect requests disguised as conversation. By then, I had lost more than money. I had lost my peace. My morning coffee tasted bitter. My plants seemed to wilt in solidarity with my spirit. The silence of the house, once a comfort, now pressed against me like a punishment. And yet, I didn't stop them. Not then. Not yet. Because for all the sacrifices I had made, for all the pride I had once felt in David, I couldn't bring myself to admit the truth. My only son and his wife were using me. I told myself it was just a rough patch. I told myself they loved me. But in my heart, I knew. The slope wasn't just slippery anymore. I was already sliding down. And I didn't know how to stop. I wish I could say I drew the line right then after the broken promises. The mounting debts. The uneasy nights spent calculating numbers that no longer added up. But the truth is, my line kept moving. Each time I told myself, this is the last time, I found another excuse when Amanda's voice turned pleading. When David's eyes dropped in shame, when the word family was spoken like a sacred oath, I was too guilty to challenge. It was Amanda's idea to simplify things. One afternoon, she arrived at my door with a bright smile and a polished story. Margaret, she said, it's too much trouble to keep calling you every time something comes up. Why don't I just hold on to your card? That way, if an emergency happens, we don't have to disturb you. The way she said it, you would think she was doing me a favor. She framed it as convenience, a way to protect me from late-night phone calls or sudden drives to the store. He hesitated. Of course, my instincts whispered no, but guilt pressed harder. What if David truly needed something urgent? What if Amanda's mother fell ill again? And so, with a shaky hand, I handed her my card. I told myself it was temporary, just until the next emergency. But temporary things have a way of becoming permanent when boundaries aren't clear. Soon, my card no longer lived in my wallet. It lived in Amanda's purse. At first, she reassured me constantly. I'll only use it for groceries, she said. Or, just for David's medication. But then the purchases grew bolder. Designer handbags, weekend getaways, expensive restaurants, always explained away with that same sugary tone. Oh, Margaret, the groceries just cost more than usual. Margaret, I saw the perfect suit for David's career growth. You want him to look professional, don't you? Margaret, it was our anniversary dinner. We wanted to celebrate, and we thought you'd be happy to treat us. Treat us. As if I were a restaurant they could charge meals to at will. The first time I tried to challenge her, Amanda's eyes filled with tears. I feel like you don't trust me, she whispered, as though I had betrayed her. After everything I've done to be a good daughter-in-law, you think I'm stealing from you? The word stealing had never even left my mouth. But there it was, out in the open, used as a weapon against me. And then came David, stepping in with that familiar mix of exasperation and guilt. Mom, you're making this harder than it needs to be. We're family. Family don't keep score. I felt cornered. My choices were either to argue and be painted as paranoid, or to surrender and be painted as generous. Neither felt like a victory. Months passed, and with them went thousands of dollars. Each month, my statements grew longer. Each month, my savings grew smaller. It wasn't until I found the photocopy that the full weight of what was happening settled over me. I had been reorganizing my documents in the lockbox, the deed to my house, my will, Richard's death certificate when I discovered it, and a crisp copy of my credit card, front and back, with Amanda's handwriting scrawled across the bottom. For emergencies, my blood ran cold. When had she made this copy? How had she gotten access to my lockbox? How many copies existed now? That night, I sat in bed staring at the slip of paper under the lamplight. I felt violated, stripped bare in the one place that should have been private. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. The next day, the bank called me about a suspicious charge, $1,200 at an electronics store. Did you authorize this purchase? Mrs. Walker, the representative asked. I hadn't. I blocked the card on the spot, requesting a new one. My hands trembled as I hung up, half with relief, half with dread. Within an hour, my phone rang. Amanda's voice cut through the line, shrill with indignation. Margaret, what have you done? I'm standing in the grocery store with a full cart, and the card was declined. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. It's not your card, I said firmly. It's mine. And it was used for a $1,200 computer I never approved. There was silence. Then a quick, nervous laugh. Oh, that. David needed a new computer for work. His broke, and we knew you'd want him to succeed. You would have said yes if we'd asked. No, I replied. My voice was steadier than I felt. I would have said no, and that's why you didn't ask. The line went dead. For the rest of the evening, the phone rang over and over. Amanda, David, Amanda again, each call unanswered, each message angrier than the last. I sat at the kitchen table with my new card tucked safely in my blouse pocket, staring at the copy I had found. I realized then that I hadn't just lost money. I had lost the balance of power in my own life. My son and his wife had taken a piece of my independence, and I had let them, but not anymore. The next morning, as I sipped my coffee, I whispered a promise to myself. This ends here. I didn't know exactly how I would fight back. I didn't know what it would cost me in love, in family, in peace. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If I didn't reclaim control of my life now, I might never get it back. For 3 days after I blocked the card, my house was wrapped in silence. No phone calls. No surprise visits. No pleading emergencies. At first, I felt relieved. I could water my plants in peace. I could sip my coffee without the shrill ring of the phone. But after a while, the silence began to feel less like freedom and more like a punishment. I wondered if that was their strategy, freeze me out until I reconsidered. On the 4th day, while I was folding laundry in my bedroom, I heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in the front door. My heart lurched. I had given David a spare key years ago, back when I still believed in unconditional trust. Now I wished I could take it back. Mom. David's voice called through the house, sharp and impatient. Amanda's heels clicked against the hardwood behind him. I stepped into the hallway. My folded towels clutched against my chest like a shield. Why are you here without calling first? David's face was red, his fists clenched. Amanda hovered behind him, arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line. Why did you humiliate my wife? David demanded. She called me from the grocery store in tears. Do you know what it's like for her to have a cart full of food and not be able to pay? You made her look like a beggar. My legs felt weak, but I steadied myself. I changed the password. David. It's my card. My money. I have the right. Your money. He spat the words like they were poison. You act like we're strangers. We're family. Everything you have exists because Dad and I are part of you. How can you be so selfish? Amanda stepped forward, her eyes glinting. We've done nothing but love you. Margaret. We've treated you like my own mother. And this is the thanks we get. Suspicion. Accusations. I set the towels on a chair and faced them. My hands trembled, but my voice stayed steady. Love does not mean draining my savings. Love does not mean hiding purchases and copying my credit card. Love does not mean lies. David's jaw tightened. Chloe, he caught himself, then corrected. Amanda told me she always asked before using the card. She lied, I said, the words sharper than I intended. The room fell into a heavy silence. David's chest rose and fell, like a storm building inside him. Don't you ever call my wife a liar? I'm not insulting her, I said quietly. I'm speaking the truth. Amanda's eyes welled with sudden tears. You see, this is what I mean. David, she doesn't trust me. She thinks I'm a thief. How can I live with that kind of judgment from my own mother-in-law? Enough, David barked. His voice echoed through the room, shaking me to my core. He stepped closer, lowering his tone, but not his fury. If you don't trust us, maybe it's time someone else managed your finances. Clearly you can't handle it. The suggestion hit me like ice water. Are you saying I'm not capable of handling my own money? David looked away, but Amanda didn't flinch. Sometimes older people struggle with these things. It's normal. It doesn't mean you're crazy. Just that maybe you need help? There it was. The threat unspoken until now. You're too old. You can't be trusted with your own life. I drew myself up, feeling Richard's memory surge behind me like a shield. This is my house, my money, my decision, and I will not be bullied in my own living room. David's eyes narrowed. Bullied. After everything we've sacrificed, after all the times we've been there for you, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. You haven't been here for me, David. You've been here for my wallet. The words seemed to strike him harder than a slap. His face darkened, his hands shaking with anger. For a long moment, I thought he might explode, but instead, he turned toward the door. This isn't over, he said coldly. When you calm down and stop acting like a child, we'll talk again. Amanda brushed past me, her perfume lingering like a warning. We just wanted to make life easier for you, she said sweetly, though her eyes told another story. You'll regret this. And then they were gone. The front door slammed shut with such force that the hinges groaned. I stood alone in the silence that followed, trembling from head to toe. My knees gave out, and I collapsed into the armchair where I once nursed David as a baby. The same chair where I stayed up nights, rocking him to sleep, whispering promises that I would always protect him. Now he was the one I needed protection from. I buried my face in my hands, my heart breaking with a grief deeper than death. Because death had taken Richard from me, but betrayal had taken David. I thought of Amanda's tears. So well-timed, so convincing. I thought of David's fury, his words like knives, selfish, childish, incapable. And I realized what terrified me most was not losing money, but losing the fragile thread that tied me to my son. Yet even through the tears, another feeling rose slowly inside me. Resolve. I might have been trembling, but I was not weak. I was 70 years old, not senile. I had worked my whole life, paid every bill, raised a son on my own, and kept this house standing. If David and Amanda thought they could strip away my dignity along with my savings, they were wrong. That afternoon, I walked to the window and looked out at my garden. The begonias were in bloom, bright red against the green leaves. Strong, resilient, alive despite the storms. So was I. The silence lasted exactly 1 week. 7 days without a call, without a knock at the door, without Amanda's carefully scripted emergencies. At first, I thought maybe they had accepted my decision, that perhaps distance would give us all time to cool down. But deep down, I knew better. People who are used to control don't give it up so easily. On the 8th day, the phone rang just after breakfast. I almost didn't answer, but the number was local, and habit is hard to break. Margaret, Amanda's voice was syrupy sweet, almost unrecognizable from the sharp tones of our last encounter. I just wanted to check on you. How are you feeling? I've missed you so much. I gripped the receiver tightly. I'm fine. Amanda, thank you for asking. Well, that's a relief. You know, David and I have been worried. You've been so distant. We just want to understand why you don't trust us anymore. My throat tightened. I never said I didn't trust you. I said I want control over my own finances. She gave a little laugh, light and condescending. Margaret, you worry too much. At your age, it's normal to get anxious about money. But that doesn't mean you should carry the burden alone. We're your family. We're supposed to help. The phrase "at your age" stuck to me like a burr. I've managed just fine for 70 years. I said firmly, I'm not helpless. Her tone softened, dripping with false sympathy. Of course you're not helpless. But you have to admit, things get harder. Details slip. It would break David's heart to see you struggle. I hung up before she could say more. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from rage. They weren't giving up. They were changing tactics. No more shouting. No more direct demands. Now it was guilt. Manipulation. Planting seeds of doubt about my mind. That was how the quiet war began. 2 days later, while watering my begonias, I overheard voices on the street outside. 3 women stood in front of my house, speaking just loudly enough for me to hear. That's the lady accusing her own son of stealing. One of them said, "Terrible shame. My grandmother got paranoid like that before she lost her mind." Another added, Poor David, can you imagine? Having to deal with a mother who doesn't know what's real anymore. My hands tightened around the watering can. The water spilled over, soaking the soil too much. They wanted the neighborhood to think I was losing my grip, that I was senile, paranoid, unstable. That night, I called my neighbor Alma, one of the few people I trusted. She came over with a casserole and a listening ear. When I told her what happened, she frowned. They're trying to discredit you. It's a common tactic in these situations. Don't let them win. Margaret, her words gave me strength, but the harassment continued. Anonymous phone calls at all hours of the night, sometimes silence, sometimes a distorted voice, muttering, "Greedy old woman." My mailbox stuffed with empty envelopes. One morning, I found my car keyed. Red spray paint spelling the words "Crazy Miser" across the door. Each act was small enough to dismiss individually, but together they formed a pattern, a campaign. David still called occasionally, his tone swinging like a pendulum between pleading and threatening. "Mom, you're overreacting. Just give us a chance to prove ourselves. Mom, you're being stubborn. Everyone thinks you're losing it. Mom, if you don't let us help, we'll have no choice but to involve the courts." Every call left me shaking, my chest tight with grief. This was my son, my only child, the boy I had rocked in my arms, the young man I had sacrificed for, and now he was tearing me down piece by piece, all because I had dared to say no. Yet amid the heartbreak, a new feeling began to take root. Resolve. I started keeping a notebook by the phone, writing down every call, every threat, every insult. I saved the spray-painted photo of my car. I logged the times and dates of the gossip I overheard on the street. Alma encouraged me to document everything. "One day, this will be evidence," she said. One evening, after yet another hang-up call, I sat in my armchair and thought about Richard. He had always said, "When life gets ugly, don't lose your dignity. That's the one thing no one can steal unless you hand it over." I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, about boundaries, about refusing to surrender the life I had built through sweat and sacrifice. The quiet war was wearing me down. Yes, but it was also sharpening me. Every cruel word, every whispered rumor, every late-night threat was a reminder of what I stood to lose if I gave in. One afternoon, I looked out at my garden, the begonias blooming bright red, the geraniums standing tall, the bougainvillea climbing stubbornly against the fence. They were thriving because I had cared for them, tended to them, protected them from weeds and storms. And I realized, if I could nurture a garden through seasons of hardship, I could nurture myself too. That evening, I picked up the phone not to answer Amanda, not to yield to David, but to call Alma. "Tomorrow," I said, my voice steady, "I need you to take me to meet that lawyer you mentioned." It's time I fought back. Alma's voice warmed through the line. "That's the Margaret I know." I hung up the phone and sat quietly, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the steady rhythm of my own breath. For the first time in months, the silence in my home felt like peace, not punishment. The war was far from over, but I was no longer a passive casualty. I was preparing for battle armed not with anger, but with truth. And I intended to win. The morning I decided to meet a lawyer, I felt both terrified and strangely relieved. For months, I had been drowning in guilt, anger, and confusion. But now, as Alma drove me downtown in her old Buick, I felt a fragile thread of hope weaving through the fear. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked, keeping her eyes on the road. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "If I don't fight back now, they'll take everything, not just my money, my dignity." We pulled up to a brick building with brass letters on the door, Vincent Harris and Associates, elder law specialists. The sight alone eased something inside me. It was proof that I wasn't alone, that there were people who understood battles like mine. Inside, the office smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. The receptionist, a cheerful young woman, smiled warmly when I gave her my name. "Mr. Harris is expecting you. Mrs. Thompson, please, have a seat." A few minutes later, a tall man with graying hair and kind, intelligent eyes came into the lobby. He wore a navy suit that looked lived in rather than stiff, and his handshake was firm but not overpowering. "Mrs. Thompson," he said with genuine respect. "I'm Vincent Harris. Let's talk in my office." His office was lined with bookshelves, stacked with law volumes, but also photographs of children and grandchildren. A family man, I thought, not just a lawyer. That comforted me more than I expected. "Tell me exactly what has been happening," he said as we sat across from each other at a broad oak desk. He had a yellow legal pad ready, pen in hand, but his eyes stayed focused on me, not the page. So I told him everything. The small loans that turned into permanent gifts, the day I first handed Amanda my credit card just for medicine, the endless charges, the lies, the photocopy of my card I found in my lockbox, the late-night withdrawals, the simultaneous purchases, the threats of guardianship. By the time I finished, my hands were trembling, but my voice hadn't cracked once. Vincent nodded slowly. "Mrs. Thompson, what you've described is family financial abuse. Unfortunately, it's far more common than most people realize. In fact, elder financial exploitation is one of the fastest-growing crimes in this country." I let out a shaky breath. "So, I'm not going crazy." "Not at all," he said firmly. "You're being manipulated, gaslighted, and taken advantage of. But you're also smart enough to see it and brave enough to come here. That's the hardest part." Tears burned the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back. I hadn't felt brave in months, just beaten down. His words felt like a lifeline. "What can we do?" I asked. "First, we protect you from the guardianship threat. We'll gather medical records from your doctor, proving your mental capacity is perfectly sound. Second, we document every instance of financial abuse. The bank statements, the photocopy of your card, the harassment you've been experiencing, all of it. Third, we prepare to recover what was taken, both civilly and criminally." Criminally. The word tasted harsh. Yes, identity theft, fraud, unauthorized use of credit. It's not just family drama. It's against the law. Whether or not you want to press charges is up to you. But the law is on your side. I sat back, my heart pounding. For so long, David and Amanda had convinced me that I was paranoid, bête, selfish. Hearing Vincent say the words, law and crime, lifted a crushing weight from my shoulders. This wasn't all in my head. It was real, and it was wrong. "What about the cost?" I asked quietly. "My fee is $3,000, he said without hesitation. "But consider this based on what you've shown me. They've already taken more than $25,000 from you. $3,000 is an investment in protecting yourself and getting justice." I looked at Alma, who nodded firmly. "It's worth it. Margaret, every penny." I turned back to Vincent. "I'll do it." He smiled gently, not triumphant but encouraging, like a teacher proud of a student who had finally spoken up. "Good. We'll file the necessary paperwork today. I'll also recommend you change your locks, cut off their access to your accounts completely, and start documenting every interaction. From now on, everything goes through me. If David or Amanda want to contact you, they'll have to go through your lawyer." The words "your lawyer" sank into me like warm sunlight. For the first time, I had someone on my side. Someone who knew how to fight battles. I couldn't fight alone. After Alma and I left, we stopped for lunch at a little cafe near the courthouse. I stirred my soup absent-mindedly, still processing everything. "You did the right thing," Alma said, her hand brushing mine across the table. "You're not powerless anymore." I nodded, though my stomach churned with nerves. I just never thought I'd be here, fighting my own son. "I know," she said softly, "but you're fighting for yourself too, and you deserve that." That night, back in my armchair, I held the contract I had signed with Vincent. My house was quiet, but it didn't feel suffocating anymore. It felt like a fortress, and I wasn't guarding it alone. For months, I had felt as if I were shrinking, fading into the shadows of fear and manipulation. But now, with Vincent Harris on my side, I felt myself begin to expand again, like a flower turning its face back to the sun after a long storm. The war wasn't over, but I had a general now, and he had promised me this. We would fight with every tool the law provided, and we would win. The next week felt like stepping into a new world. Instead of sitting alone at my dining table, drowning in fear, I now sat in Vincent's office with files. folders, and strategy plans spread before me. He and his small team moved with a precision that amazed me. It was as if they had fought this battle 100 times before, and won. Mrs. Aging, Thompson, Vincent began, tapping the stack of bank statements I had brought. What we have here is already substantial. But if we're going to build an airtight case, we need more than numbers. We need proof that you could not have made these purchases. That's where we'll focus. His assistant, a sharp young woman named Claire, added, "We've already requested security footage from several stores where your card was used. We've also traced the IP addresses of some online purchases." He blinked. "You can do that?" "Absolutely," she said with confidence. "When an online purchase is made, the company logs the location. If it doesn't match your home, we'll have proof someone else was behind the screen." I sat there, stunned. For 2 years, I had been questioning my memory, doubting my own instincts. And here they were, treating me not like a fragile old woman, but like a client with rights worth defending. 3 days later, I was back in the office when Vincent set down a thick folder in front of me. "You'd better brace yourself," he said gently. Inside were photographs grainy but clear enough. Amanda at a boutique checkout, sliding my card across the counter. David at an electronics store, signing my name with a sloppy scrawl. Another photo of Amanda laughing with a cashier, holding bags stuffed with clothing. My stomach clenched. They didn't even try to hide it. That's often the case. Vincent replied, "Abusers rely on secrecy and intimidation. They don't expect their victims to fight back. But you did." Claire flipped to the next section. "We also traced the IP addresses of online purchases. Several were placed from David's apartment, some from Amanda's workplace, and a few from coffee shops near their home. Not a single one came from your address." I stared at the evidence, feeling both vindicated and devastated. I trusted them. I gave them everything. And this is what they were doing behind my back. Vincent leaned forward. "Margaret, what you're feeling right now is betrayal, and it's the heaviest part of this kind of case. But I want you to also feel something else. Validation. You weren't imagining things. You weren't paranoid. They really were stealing from you." Tears blurred the words on the page, but I forced myself to keep looking. For so long, I had carried the shame of doubting my son, of saying no to him. But the truth was staring back at me. Undeniable. And there's more. Vincent continued carefully. He slid another folder across the desk. "We've discovered 3 additional credit accounts, all opened in your name. These were approved online using your social security number, date of birth, and other personal information." My heart stopped. "In my name?" "Yes. The statements show they were mailed to David's address. They've already accumulated nearly $15,000 in debt across those accounts." The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. 15,000, and I didn't even know they existed. "I'm afraid so," Vincent said, his voice calm but firm. "But don't panic. This is identity theft. With proper documentation, we can have these accounts canceled and the debt removed from your record." I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to breathe. How could my own son? The words broke off, choked by disbelief. Vincent's eyes softened, because he stopped seeing you as his mother and started seeing you as a resource. "It's cruel, but it happens. What matters now is that we stop it." Alma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She had insisted on coming to the meeting, her presence steady as always. "Margaret, listen to him. You have the truth on your side now. And you have us." I nodded, though my whole body trembled. "What happens next?" Vincent outlined the plan. "File fraud disputes with the 3 major credit bureaus. Submit evidence of unauthorized charges to my bank. Prepare a criminal complaint for identity theft and financial exploitation. Compile all evidence for the guardianship hearing," which was now officially scheduled. As he spoke, I realized something. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. That evening, back at my dining table, I spread out the evidence Vincent had given me. Photos of Amanda swiping my card. Receipts from stores I'd never entered. Statements for accounts I hadn't opened. For the first time in 2 years, in E2 have Leblashan Reddit, I didn't feel like the villain in my own story. I was the victim, but I was also the fighter. The phone rang. I recognized David's number and let it go to voicemail. His voice came through, frantic and sharp. "Mom, what are you doing? We just got a notice from the credit bureau. You're accusing us of fraud. This is insane. You're going to ruin everything." I deleted the message without finishing it. For so long, his voice had held power over me. Power to shame, to guilt, to bend me into silence. But now I had proof. And with proof came strength. That night, lying in bed, I touched the pearl necklace Robert had given me decades ago. His words echoed in my memory. "For the strongest woman I know, so you never forget your worth." For years, I had forgotten. But now, piece by piece, I was remembering. The battle was far from over. But the fraud was no longer hidden in the shadows. It was exposed, indéniable, and soon it would be judged for what it truly was. The first sign of retaliation came on a Wednesday evening. I had just finished watering the begonias in the front yard when the phone rang. I checked the caller ID, an unfamiliar number, but something in my gut told me to let it go to voicemail. The message played seconds later. David's voice, clipped and cold. "Mom, I know what you're doing. You've made a huge mistake. If you don't drop this nonsense, we'll have no choice but to prove you're unfit. Think carefully. Think carefully." The phrase slithered into my ears like a threat wrapped in silk. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone. I had raised this boy, comforted his nightmares, celebrated his victories, and now, he was warning me like an enemy. That night, Alma refused to go home. "I'll stay on your couch," she said, her voice steady, but her eyes sharp with worry. "They're trying to scare you into surrendering. Don't give them that satisfaction." The next morning, when I went out to collect the newspaper, I froze. Red spray paint slashed across the side of my car. 2 words, "Krazy miser." My knees weakened, but I refused to cry. Instead, I fetched a bucket of soapy water and a sponge. Alma joined me, scrubbing in silence. When the words faded, my resolve sharpened. They wanted me humiliated, but I would not let them see me bend. By Friday, the phone calls multiplied. Sometimes it was David, sometimes Amanda, sometimes voices I didn't recognize, friends of theirs. I guessed. Some pleaded. Others shouted. One woman sneered. "What kind of mother drags her son to court? Shame on you." I started keeping a log, just like Vincent advised. Time, number, message, every detail. The notebook became both shield and weapon, evidence of their campaign against me. Then came the visitors. A knock at the door one afternoon revealed 2 women I had never seen before. They stood on my porch with grocery bags, pretending to be neighbors delivering food. But their voices carried too loudly as they chatted to each other. "That's the house of the old lady accusing her own family." One said, "Terrible, isn't it? My grandmother went paranoid too before she lost everything." The other replied. Their words were bait, meant for my ears. I shut the door quietly and wrote the encounter in my log. When Vincent saw the entries that weekend, his jaw tightened. "They're building a narrative," he explained. "They want to make you look unstable in the eyes of the community, so they'll have witnesses for the guardianship hearing. Don't worry. This is a tactic we know well. Document everything. It'll backfire on them." Still, the harassment chipped away at me. At night, I lay awake, listening for footsteps outside, for knocks on the door, for the shrill ring of the phone. Sleep became shallow, fragile, easily broken. One night at 3 a.m., the phone rang. Without thinking, I answered. Amanda's voice hissed through the line, distorted as though she cupped the receiver. "I hope you're happy, Margaret. I hope you're happy destroying your family for dirty money. Do you even know where that money came from? Ask yourself what kind of man Robert really was." The words hit like a knife to the ribs. Robert. My Robert had worked honestly for 20 years as an accountant. He had been a quiet man, faithful, hardworking, gentle. To hear Amanda smear his memory was almost unbearable. "Don't you dare speak about my husband," I whispered, my voice trembling. But she had already hung up. I set the receiver down, my hands shaking. For a long time, I stared into the darkness of my bedroom, hearing Robert's voice in memory. "For the strongest woman I know, so you never forget your worth." They were trying to shatter me by tarnishing his memory. That was the line I could not allow them to cross. The next morning, I told Vincent everything. His eyes narrowed. They've crossed into psychological abuse. This is not just financial anymore. We'll add it to the restraining request. They've shown a pattern of harassment that no judge will ignore. Alma touched my arm. You're not alone in this. Margaret, not anymore. Her words held me together that day. On Sunday, I went to church for the first time in months. As I sat in the pew, listening to the choir, a strange calm settled over me. Not because I expected divine justice to fall from the sky, but because I realized something. My fight wasn't just about numbers in a bank account. It was about dignity, about refusing to be erased by fear, even if the people trying to erase me were my own flesh and blood. When I returned home, Alma was waiting with a pot of soup simmering on the stove. We ate together in silence. Outside, the begonias glowed red in the setting sun, stubbornly blooming despite the storm around them. They want to make you afraid, Alma said finally. Spoon paused halfway to her mouth. But you're stronger than fear. I nodded, though tears slipped down my cheeks. I'm learning that. Alma, I really am. That night, as I locked the doors and checked the windows, I felt the weight of the war pressing in, but I also felt the armor building around me. Proof, allies, resolve. The storm of threats had begun. But storms, no matter how fierce, always pass. And when this one did, I promised myself I would still be standing. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and polished floors, a mix of history and authority that made my stomach twist. I clutched my purse close, not for the money inside, but for the stack of papers Vincent had told me to keep with me. Bank statements, certified reports, copies of every note I'd taken about the harassment. Alma walked beside me like a sentry. She had insisted on coming, her presence a steady anchor. In the whirlwind of fear, Vincent met us at the front steps, his suit crisp, his expression calm but purposeful. Margaret, he said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Today, the truth speaks louder than fear. Remember that. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Intimate even, as if the walls wanted to listen closely to the human drama inside. At one table sat David and Amanda with their young lawyer, a man with slicked-back hair and a tie that looked more expensive than his years. Amanda's eyes found mine, cool and sharp. David avoided my gaze. When the judge entered, everyone rose. His presence filled the room, middle-aged, serious, the kind of man who seemed to see through excuses before they were spoken. The hearing began with David's lawyer. His voice was smooth, practiced. Your Honor, this case is about an elderly woman who has, unfortunately, begun to display paranoia and confusion, resulting in false accusations against her own family. My clients, David and Amanda Johnson, have simply tried to help manage her finances responsibly. Now they are being unfairly accused. Paranoia, confusion. Those words stung, even though I had heard them before. Then it was Vincent's turn. He rose slowly, unrolling a yellow legal pad. Your Honor, this case is not about paranoia. It is about exploitation. What we have here is a systematic pattern of financial abuse, unauthorized charges, fraudulent accounts, harassment, and an attempt to seize legal control of my client's assets. He laid the evidence out like puzzle pieces. Bank statements showing thousands in unauthorized purchases, photocopies of my card with Amanda's handwriting, certified reports of 3 credit cards opened in my name without permission, even surveillance images of Amanda at boutiques and restaurants, using my card while records proved I was at home or on the phone. David Slavier objected, tried to spin each piece as a misunderstanding. Verbal authorization, he kept repeating. Family trust, miscommunication. But each time, Vincent countered with precise facts. Then it was time for witnesses. David's lawyer called 2 neighbors who claimed I had been forgetful lately, that I sometimes repeated myself in conversations. They hinted at confusion, at paranoia, but Vincent dismantled them gently. He asked one neighbor if she had ever seen me mishandle my finances. She admitted no. He asked the other if she had ever borrowed money from me. She admitted yes, and that I had given her an exact amount with a signed note. The judge raised an eyebrow. Next came the testimony that saved me. My family doctor, Dr. Ellis. He spoke clearly, firmly. I've treated Mrs. Persizanet. Johnson for over 15 years. Her cognitive tests, memory evaluations, and neurological screenings are all within normal range for her age. She is fully capable of making sound financial decisions. As a prided, relief washed over me like cool water. Finally, I was called to the stand. My hands trembled. But when I spoke, my voice surprised me. It was steady, measured. Your Honor, I raised my son alone after my husband died. I worked 2 jobs. I saved. I sacrificed. I trusted David and Amanda with my finances because I believed family meant protection. But instead, I lost over $25,000 in unauthorized purchases, plus another $15,000 in fraudulent accounts I never knew existed. When I tried to stop it, they threatened me. They tried to paint me as unstable so they could take legal control of everything I had left. I'm here not just for my money. I'm here for my dignity. For a moment, silence filled the courtroom. Even David looked down at the table, his jaw tight. Amanda, however, kept her chin high. When the judge finally spoke, his words carried the weight of iron. This court finds that the petition for guardianship is without merit. In fact, it appears to have been filed as a tactic of intimidation. The evidence shows clear financial abuse, unauthorized use of credit cards, fraudulent accounts, and a disturbing pattern of harassment. Therefore, I ordered David and Amanda Johnson to repay Mrs. Bax's and Amanda Johnson, at order David and Amanda Johnson, and Amanda Johnson, at order David and Amanda Johnson. Johnson, the documented $25,000 plus interest, and cover her legal expenses. The fraudulent accounts will be canceled. The debts erased from her record. Furthermore, a restraining order is granted. For 1 year, neither David nor Amanda may contact Mrs. Prizes Johnson directly. Any communication must go through legal counsel. I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. Not paranoia. Not confusion. Truth. The gavel struck. The case was done. Vincent leaned over and whispered, "You won." As we left the courthouse, Alma squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt. But I welcomed the pain. It reminded me I was alive. Still standing. Still Mina. Outside. The autumn air was cool. The sky. A hard blue. Reporters weren't there. Neighbors weren't there, just me. Alma and Vincent walking down the steps together. I had defended my name, my mind, my future. But the victory was bittersweet. Because in that courtroom, I had also lost my son. And yet, as Vincent said quietly beside me, sometimes, Margaret, protecting yourself means letting go of what's already gone. I nodded, the courthouse fading behind us. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest felt lighter. I had not only survived the storm, I had spoken my truth, and the law had listened. When the judge's gavel fell, it was as if a heavy curtain had dropped over the last 2 years of my life. The courtroom battle was behind me, but the echoes of it lingered in my chest like a drumbeat. For days afterward, I kept expecting the phone to ring with more accusations, more threats, more pleading, but it stayed silent. For the first time in months, silence felt like peace, not punishment. The restraining order meant I didn't have to brace myself for unexpected knocks on my door or whispers in the neighborhood. I no longer flinched at every unfamiliar number on the caller ID. My home was quiet again, and I realized how much I had missed that simple gift. I could sit in my armchair by the window, watch the birds pick at the feeder, sip my coffee without a knot of fear twisting in my stomach. But peace didn't mean joy. Not right away. There was an emptiness I couldn't ignore, a hole shaped like my son. For all that David had done, for all the ways Amanda had twisted him against me, I still longed for the boy I once knew, the boy who used to run down the street waving his report card, eager to show me his good grades, the man who hugged me tightly after his father's funeral, promising he would take care of me. That boy, that man, was gone. I mourned him as if he had died. Alma reminded me gently, "Margaret, grief isn't just for death. It's for every loss we can't undo." She was right. Every morning, when I brewed my coffee in the pot Robert had given me so many years ago, I whispered a small prayer for strength, for clarity, for healing, even for David. Vincent became a constant presence. At first, our meetings were about paperwork tracking the repayment plan. checking that the fraudulent accounts were erased from my record. He was diligent, professional, and precise. But little by little, our conversations stretched beyond documents. We'd sit on my patio long after the files were tucked away, talking about books, about his grown children who lived out of state, about the quiet loneliness of losing a spouse. He had lost his wife 5 years before. When he spoke of her, his voice softened, but it wasn't only sadness. I heard it was love. Still alive, still present. That stirred something in me. I realized I hadn't spoken Robert's name out loud in months, afraid that remembering would make me weaker. But Vincent encouraged me. "Speak of him," he said. "Love doesn't vanish when a person is gone. It changes shape, but it remains." So I began to tell Vincent stories about Robert, the way he used to whistle while fixing the porch, the way he slipped me notes during Sunday sermons when he thought the pastor droned too long, the way he beamed, the first time he held David in his arms. Sharing those memories hurt, but it also soothed. It was as though Robert was back with me, sitting between us, reminding me of the life I had built with strength and care. By autumn, the repayments began to arrive in small, court-ordered installments. Every month, a deposit appeared in my account. I didn't celebrate the money, it wasn't victory, just restitution, but each payment was a reminder that I had stood up for myself. Each dollar symbolized a piece of dignity, reclaimed. I poured some of that money into my garden. I bought new tools, new seeds, a fresh layer of mulch. I planted roses by the front fence, not just to beautify my home, but to remind myself that I could still grow something meaningful. The roses bloomed in shades of red and yellow, bright against the fading grass of October. Neighbors walking by would stop and compliment them. I accepted their words with gratitude. Knowing the roses were more than flowers, they were proof of resilience. Still, the nights were the hardest. Sometimes I'd dream of David as a boy, running barefoot in the yard, laughing with pure joy. I'd wake up with tears on my pillow, torn between anger and longing. Alma once told me, "It's possible to love someone and protect yourself from them at the same time." That thought became my anchor. I loved my son, but I could not let him destroy me. One evening, Vincent lingered after dinner. The dishes were washed, the table cleared, but he stayed, sipping tea slowly. Finally, he set his cup down and looked at me with eyes steady and kind. "Margaret," he said softly, "I know the wounds are fresh. I know you've lost much. But I also see strength in you I haven't seen in many clients. You didn't just defend your finances. You defended your worth. That's no small thing." I felt a lump in my throat. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like survival. Survival is strength, he answered, and strength can grow into joy, given time. His words planted a seed inside me. For the first time, I considered the possibility that my story wasn't over that life. Even in my 70s, still had chapters left to write. That night, I sat on my porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The air was crisp, the stars faint, but steady. I thought about Robert, about David, about Alma's unwavering support, and Vincent's quiet companionship. I thought about myself, too, not as a victim, but as a woman who had walked through fire and emerged, scarred but standing. The aftermath wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, and though my heart still ached for what I had lost, it also stirred with gratitude for what remained and for what might still come. One quiet Sunday afternoon, Vincent asked me to take a walk. Autumn leaves covered the streets, and the golden light made everything gentle. I had once walked these same paths with Robert, then later with David when he was a child. Now, at 72, I walked beside a man who came into my life, not through family ties but through kindness and compassion. Vincent paused under the arching oak trees. "Margaret," he said softly, "I know this past year has been full of storms, but maybe it's time to let some light back in." My breath caught as he continued. "Meeting you reminded me that hearts can still bloom, no matter our age." That night, I sat by the window, watching the roses I had planted after the trial still blooming despite the chill. I thought of Robert, of loss, and realized every ending can open the door to a new beginning. In the months that followed, Vincent became a steady presence. We shared dinners, tended the garden, even read the same books. Our lives wove together quietly, without drama, just gentle companionship. Alma teased me once. Margaret, you smile differently now, like someone who's found a reason to look forward to tomorrow. Then, one spring evening, Vincent asked, "Would you marry me?" My heart stumbled. But why not? Love isn't measured by youth. It's about choosing someone to walk with. Yes, I would, I whispered. Our wedding was small and simple. Just Alma and Vincent's brother as witnesses. When he slipped the ring onto my finger, I didn't feel fragile, I felt at peace. Of course, the past left its scars. I heard that David divorced and left town with nothing. He called me once, weary, asking for forgiveness. I've already forgiven you, I told him. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean going back. You must rebuild your life. Just as I rebuilt mine. The words hurt, but they were true. Life with Vincent blossomed quietly. We enjoyed simple meals, weekend drives, evenings filled with laughter. He treated me as a partner, not a burden. One sunset, he squeezed my hand and said, "You didn't just survive. Margaret, you're truly living." Leaning against his shoulder, I smiled. I had once thought my story was over, but it was only beginning. At 72, I finally learned it is never too late to begin again. Looking back now, I realize that life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. For a long time, I thought my journey had ended in loss, losing Robert, losing David, losing the sense of family I once held so tightly. But in choosing to defend myself, I found something far greater: dignity, freedom, and the courage to begin again. When people hear my story, they sometimes shake their heads in disbelief. Yet these are not just tales spun for sympathy. These are her true stories, moments of resilience and heartbreak that so many older women quietly endure. Sharing them matters because silence only feeds the cycle of exploitation. I tell myself often, it is through her true stories that we remember our worth. It is through her true stories that we remind one another that boundaries are not selfish but necessary. It is through her true stories that women of every age can see that their voices matter. I am not the only one. Every day, countless mothers and grandmothers fight invisible battles within their own families. And so I share her true stories, not just mine, but ours, as proof that even in the twilight years, life can still offer light, love, and hope. Because sometimes, the most powerful victories are hidden inside her true stories.